and will be ready as a brave soldier to risk my life at any time for this oath." At Hindenburg's funeral on the 7th of August, Blomberg suggested to the new president that all soldiers should henceforth address him as Mein Führer, a proposal which was graciously accepted. Hitler had won ultimate power, but only at the sufferance of the German army, and just 2 days after Hindenburg's funeral, on Thursday the 9th of August 1934, Blomberg wrote a terse one-sentence and hitherto unpublished letter to Hitler stating, "Mein Führer, ich bitte an die in Aussicht gestellt Verfügen, an die Wehrmacht erinnern zu dürfen." Blomberg: "My leader, I would like to remind you of your statement to the Wehrmacht." Blomberg. The tone was somewhat peremptory, reminding Hitler of his side of the Deutschland Pact, a pledge without which he would not have been able to gain the military and political supremacy that was to allow him, only 5 years later, to plunge the world into the most catastrophic war mankind has ever known. Blomberg was in a position to insist on proper observation of the pact, for, as the British historian of the German High Command, Sir John Wheeler Bennett, wrote, "Till August 1934, the army could have overthrown the Nazi regime at a nod from their commanders, for they owed no allegiance to the Chancellor. But with the acceptance of Hitler's succession, the generals had added one more fetter, perhaps the strongest of all, to those psychological bonds which chained them ever more inescapably to a regime which they had thought to exploit and dominate." A week after receiving Blomberg's letter, Hitler published the full text of Hindenburg's last will and testament in the Nazi Party newspaper Völkischer Beobachter. This document stressed that in the Third German Reich, the guardian of the state, the Reichswehr, must be the symbol of and firm support for this superstructure. On the Reichswehr, as a firm foundation, must rest the old Prussian virtues of self-realized dutifulness, of simplicity, and of comradeship. Always, and at all times, the Reichswehr must remain the pattern of state conduct, so that, unbiased by any internal political development, its lofty mission for the defence of the country may be maintained. The thanks of the Field Marshal of the World War and its Commander-in-Chief are due to all the men who have accomplished the construction and organization of the Reichswehr." The next day, the 19th of August, the German people voted in a plebiscite on whether Hitler should hold the combined offices of President and Reich Chancellor, with more than 38 million people, or 89.9%, voting yes. On the 20th of August, Hitler continued to repay his Deutschland debt, writing to Blomberg, and in effect confirming, that the secret pact was still operative. He thanked the general for the army's oath of loyalty, and added, "I shall always regard it as my highest duty to intercede for the existence and inviolability of the Wehrmacht, in fulfilment of the testament of the late Field Marshal, and in accord with my own will to establish the army firmly as the sole bearer of the arms of the nation." Nothing so consolidated the Führer's standing with his generals as the series of politico-diplomatic coups that he pulled off around the borders of Germany between March 1936 and August 1939, which turned the humiliated power of the Versailles Treaty, under which she had lost 13.5% of her territory, into the potentially glorious Third Reich. Hitler's regular protestations of pacific intentions worked well in lulling foreigners' suspicions, but were correctly seen as utterly bogus by the senior commanders of the Wehrmacht, Kriegsmarine, and Luftwaffe, whom he was simultaneously ordering to prepare for a general European conflict sooner rather than later. "Germany will, of its own accord, never break the peace," he told the journalist G. Ward Price of London's Daily Mail in February 1935, for example. But a few days later he decided that the Wehrmacht needed to be increased from 21 to 36 divisions as soon as possible. His intention was to have a 63-division army, almost the same size as in 1914, by the year 1939.